see what's going on. Hold on real quick. Hold on a second. No big deal. All right. Let's get started, everybody. In-depth discuss. Yeah, right. In-depth, my ass. Meditations on Frantz. 4B. Let's start with the same with the same question, and meditate on the first paragraph of the first chapter. National liberation. National renaissance of restoration of nationhood to the people, whatever may be the heading used or a new formula or new formulas in. Oh my gosh, I already got a freaking violation. What the hell? Hello.
New record.
Jesus Christ. Hello. Hold on a second. How much is more necessary must it be for us to focus on the need to develop a revolutionary conscience here in the belly of the beast, where even the so-called radical left is little more than an appendage of bourgeois liberalism, and in many cases serves as a buffer between capitalist colonialism and the people's struggle for independence and socialism. All critical thoughts is expressed by the media and the market and the educational process. Let's start with same questions and meditate on the first paragraph of the first chapter. National liberation, is it renaissance? Renaissance and restorations of nationhood to the people, whatever may be the heading used or the new formulas introduced. Decolonization is always a violent phenomenon, the replacing of a certain species of people by another species of people. Without any period of transition, there is a total, complete, and absolute substitution. To tell the truth, the proof of success lies in the whole social structure being changed from the bottom up. I've meditated on this paragraph, and among the questions I've raised about it are, quote, 1, what is violence and why is it always necessary? 2, what is decolonization? 3, what is social structure and why is change therefore a necessary criterion for the success of the struggle? And 4, what does Fanon mean by species and why does he put it within quotation marks in this paragraph? 5, why does he refer to the restoration of nationhood and what is a nation? Only after going through Wretched several times and then returning to reflect on this paragraph was I able to recognize the context of the voice of which Fanon was speaking here. That is, 1, he appears to be telling us what is, but his actual telling us is us what was. 2, he seems to be speaking in absolute terms, suggesting, for example, that there will not be or should not be a period of transition, and that instead there be a simple mechanical substitution of species, a mere change of place, one for the other. This is not the case. Taking us through a process of struggle, Fanon starts at the beginning of the birth of revolutionary consciousness and confrontation. He gives us a look through the eyes and unto the mind of the colonized person who stands in the colonial period and is only beginning to engage the process of decolonization. That is, it's in the colonial period that the people look ahead and tend to believe that there should be no period in transition, and they assume that there will be a simple substitution for themselves, for the settlers. At the beginning of the struggle, the people don't understand, for example, the multiple meanings of the term species that causes Fanon to qualify it. In fact, the word is placed within quotation marks to warn us not to take it at its conventional meaning. I know it's kind of like giving away the plot, but we need to jump to the second chapter for a moment and try to unravel a bit of complexity, because it's there that Fanon then speaking in the voice of one who's matured a bit and suffered a few setbacks during the decolonization period. Tell us that while the native thought that he could pass through without transition from the status of colonized person to that of a self-governed citizen and of an independent nation, while he grasped at the mirage of his muscles' own intimate immediacy, he made no real progress along the road of knowledge. His consciousness remains rudimentary. I can't say it. Rudimentary. Now, I've chosen to make this connection between the first and second chapter, between the subject of violence and spontaneity, as a way of erecting my own flashing light, and to make the point that Fanon makes repeatedly throughout the book, but that we tend to miss, is not a mere matter of using our forms of struggle. To paraphrase Fanon, the people can't become self-governing citizens in a truly dependent nation without developing their consciousness. No matter how much or how well they fight or how skillful they are in the use of weapons, failure to grasp this fact accounts for much of the backsliding among would-be activists, and for many of the failures of past attempts at revolutionary transformation on these and other shores. Quote, national liberation or revolution is about the transformation of people and their consciousness. Fanon started by giving us a glimpse of the state of people at the beginning, and we should reflect upon our own beginnings, past and present. In our present, we stand in what I call a post-neocolonial period, but but no matter what it's called, it's a period of beginnings, a period, quote, before the fight starts, and we're engaging in building foundations for a renewing effort to decolonize, to delink from the capitalist ways. It is in this context, Fanon reminds us that as we look ahead, we must be able to determine, quote, which is a true decolonization, i.e. one in which the people have developed a revolutionary consciousness and assume collective mastery, and which a false and the importance of a coherent perception of appropriate means of tactics, i.e., quote, how to conduct and organize the movement. In order to determine the best means of properly conducting the struggle, we gotta ask questions, call into question everything about colonialism, post-neocolonialism, and capitalism. Some people may think that the raising of questions, such as those I raise above about the first paragraph, is unnecessary, or that the answers are obvious. I've read that first paragraph more times than I can remember, but the questions weren't always raised, and the answers weren't then, nor are they now obvious. My understanding of Wretched and of Fanon's thought and of our social revolutionary process always suffered from my failures to raise a properly answer these and similar questions. I know I am not alone. When Fanon implores us to question everything, we must take that literally and probe the meaning and implications. Underneath it all is a quest to share with Fanon, quote, that assumption about the need for efforts to be well informed, for work with which is enlightened and free from its historical and intellectual darkness, so that we may hasten the growth of consciousness and necessity from which there is no escape. If we wish to make progress through the process of raising questions, we challenge ideas and structures, and we transform ourselves, all through reflection. Fanon wants us to raise questions because he wants us to think critically. This is a simple but fundamental point, one of the keys to a truly independent and progressive future. Reflect a bit, too, on the phrase, quote, intellectual darkness, and get away from conventional Western Euro-American idea that, quote, ordinary people, end quote, can't be or shouldn't be intellectual. Get away from the idea that only certain people or groups can be intellectual, and think about everyone as intellectual. Even go back to the first paragraph and reflect on that question about the social structures being changed from the bottom up, and connect this to the need for all of the people to develop and exercise their mental capacities in the effort to solve the theoretical and practical problems of the society. This reminds me of a line from George Jackson's read, "The oppressive state has molded the people through a, quote, what to think program, and the task of the people is to develop a, quote, how to think program, to question, to imagine that things can be different, and that the people themselves, that you can make all necessary changes. There will be no revolution without theory or without mass participation and the assumption of responsibility by you, the people. We have attempted to rebuild. It's fitting that we reread and meditate on this book by Fanon, especially if we understand its relationship to the problems that we face 40 years after it was. There are oh my gosh, we face 40 years after it was. There are some who think that the slogan rebuild means that we, in some mysterious way, start where we left off, meaning the high tide of struggle in the 1960s and early 1970s. It's assumed that we can start to rebuild by miraculously producing an instant, quote, high tide, which of course should include armed action. It's assumed that the new high tide can be created by simply wishing for it or calling for it. It's assumed that armed actions are appropriate simply because some of us are angry or frustrated, or mistake our consciousness for that of the people. It's also assumed that the high tide was arrested by the mere repression of the movement by the settler imperialist state and had nothing to do with our own shortcomings. My generation may remember Mao saying that on occasions when the revolution fails, it's the fault of the so-called vanguard. We need to understand the old movement is dead and it can not be rebuilt. We cannot return to the past or rebuild the past, nor can we build a new movement without sufficient foundation. If we consider that the late 1960s represented the high tide of progress, a process, we have to know when and how that process was started. A high tide is the result of the kind of work that most of us shun as if it were a plague. In this instance, where like those militants, Fanon refers to who must go to the countryside and or to the mountains, quote, towards bases grounded in the people. And I'm not even talking about what to do when one reaches those bases, just that those bases must be approached. Hopefully, we won't act like the Vietnamese cadres who got to the base but didn't know what to do or how to do it, and blame his shortcomings on the people. He merely cursed reality because he didn't fully appreciate that his job was to change reality, to change it as it is, to transform it into the pattern of new customs and the plan for freedom. We can even put, oh my gosh, another fucking violation. Fuck off. You allow this content on other people's? No different. Who's this? I don't know who that is. We can even put it another way. If we want to help to build a new revolutionary movement, among the things that we must do are: 1, thoroughly examine the past, learn the lessons, and begin to use what we learn, while 2, building bases grounded in the people, learning from them, sharing our knowledge with them, becoming one of them, and sharing with them as one of them the responsibility for leadership of the movement and for the new society that we're creating. We have to start this process by finally admitting to ourselves that the old movement is dead. We have to acknowledge that, saying we didn't take George Jackson to heart when he told us that what we needed to do in order to keep the people from becoming Americans again after they left the marches and rallies. 10 minutes after the success of the state's strategy to neutralize the movement created new buffer classes, a pseudo and petty bourgeois spokesperson / leaders. And then it has a little thing that's going to go into it. I don't know who this is by. The effectiveness of rallies and mass demonstrations has not come to an end. Their purpose has drastically altered, but the general tactic remains sound. Today, the rally efforts affords us the opportunity to effect intensive organization and of the projects and programs that will form the infrastructure. If the mass rallies close, as they have in the past, with a few speeches and a pamphlet, we can expect no more results than in the past. 2 hours later, the people will be Americans again, but going among the people at each gathering with clipboards and pens and painfully ascertaining what each can contribute to the clear-cut, carefully defined political projects is the distinction between organization and sterile, silted attempts. Today, the people are Americans. Even most of the so-called radicals and nationalists are Americans at heart. They are consumers and proponents of consumption. They are taken by the commodity fetish. They will not advocate real revolution and the armed forms of struggle that must be part of the process. They won't support any sincere attempt to generate such a process. These are the people about whom Fanon said, quote, their objective is not the radical overthrow of the system. And then right now we're going to go to what he says. What are the forces which in the colonial period open up new outlets and engender new aims for the violence of colonized people? In the first place, there are the political parties and the intellectuals or the commercial elites. Now, the characteristic features of certain political structures is that they proclaim abstract principles, but refrain from issuing definite commands. The entire action of these nationalist political parties during the colonial period is action of the electoral type. A string of philosophical political dissertations on the themes of the rights of peoples to self-determination, the rights of man to freedom from hunger and human dignity, and the unceasing affirmation of the principle, quote, one man, one vote, end quote. The national political parties never lay stress upon the necessity of the trial of armed strength for the good reason that their objective is not the radical overthrowing of the system. Pacifists and legalists, they are in fact partisan of order, the new order, but to the colonialist bourgeoisie, even they put bluntly enough, the demand which to them is the main one, quote, give us more power. On the specific question of violence, the elite are ambiguous. They are violent in words and reformist in their attitude. When the nationalist political leaders say something, they make quite clear that they do not really think it. Let's go back. Where was I at? I'm gonna look for it. There it is. In all the scholarly works that they do, they won't write about the Nat Turner Rebellion or hold seminars on the legitimacy of the counter-violence of oppressed peoples. And it sometimes even happens that they go so far as to condemn the spectacular deeds which are declared hateful by the press and public opinion in the mother country. They will support Muma because they think he's innocent, but they won't support Sandati Kulai or Bashir Ahmed or any other political / prisoners of war that languish behind the walls years after the memories of the struggle have faded. Would-be cadres think that all they should have to do is give a brief talk about how bad things are and why people should resist, i.e. take up arms, and think that this is all that's necessary, and then curse the people when they don't respond as we think they should, as if this is enough to change a mindset that's reproduced and reinforced by print media and soap operas, romance novels, and ads for cosmetics and cars and gadgets that claim to solve all of your problems. We become confused when we find that the 5 minutes talk isn't enough to overcome the pressures that force people to conform on the job, or to give in to the children who want the latest fashion, toys, or video games. But then we want those things ourselves, don't we? The consumers that we are, the Americans that we are. Check it. All of this is about values, and it's about the forms of colonial violence that creep into our homes and into our minds. The job of the would-be cadre is to begin to analyze and understand our concrete reality, and to apply what we learn in the books to this reality. We have to be creative in shaping forms of revolutionary violence in order to negate colonial violence in all its forms on all social levels. But dig this, it's always about concrete conditions. You have to figure out exactly where we are today. What is this place? How did we get here? Sound too simple, really, which may account for our inability to grasp it in a timely manner, forcing us to have to start from scratch every 30 to 40 years. We study other revolutions, the struggles of other peoples, and we are inspired by them. However, we find it hard to generate a struggle of our own because we still have, on one hand, the great divide among ourselves, i.e., those that want to be free and those that want to accommodate themselves to the fetish. These days, agitation is not to be based on the integration of a water fountain or a bus, but say the robbery of the by the by the insurance companies and those that make the legal drugs that far more people are addicted to than those using the seed powder. The people are being stuck up every time they fill their gas tanks. I would be irresponsible if I failed to note this essential point for anyone serious about change. These days, a few of you already practice this point. You cannot do the depth and breadth of the work if you all have to spend 24 hours a day working for IBM because you have to pay rent and there are other bills. Some of us have to rethink the collective 21st century style, contemporary American style. Some of us will have to support at least one real cadre. Working for change is a full-time job, and we cannot continue to try to do this work solely from within 501c, or by using the few hours per day after work that we say we're using for the cost. Jeez, I'm having a horrible time reading today. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to the next point? Any other questions?
No questions here.
All right, sounds good. Sorry if I'm not reading too well. 4C. What is violence? And why is it always necessary for successful decolonization? Since we're talking about the colonial and capitalist context, it will be necessary to know something about colonialism and how violence is manifested in the colonial context, i.e. colonial violence. In my search for answers to the question, I first went to the dictionary and then to the thesaurus. And here is what I began to work with. Violence is that which injures, i.e. it does an injustice to, it wrongs, harms, impairs, and tarnishes the standing of, it gives pain to, as in to injure one's pride, to it's detrimental, defamatory, and it violates others. Violence is that which abuses, i.e. even with words, it reviles. It's that which puts to a wrong or improper use. Violence is maltreatment. Check it. Every time you say the N word or the B word or H word, which I'm going to say once, ho, you're committing a violent act. Violence is treatment, i.e. behavior to bear oneself towards, to act upon, especially to alter or manipulate, or procedures, i.e. actions, conduct, process that distorts, alters out of original conditions or situations, deforms or falsifies, infringes, breaks, defeats, frustrates, encroaches upon in a way that violates another, or profanes, i.e. debases or defiles. Colonialism and capitalism, Colonialism, capitalism is the economic, political, and socio-economic forms brings violence into the home and into the minds of the people. And the process of decolonization, revolutionary counter-violence, is a battle to be waged in the media and in the marketplace, the sports arenas, and the barbershops and street corners, even as we select subjects to be discussed. Let's go down here. The colonial world is a world divided into compartments. It is probably unnecessary to recall the existence of native quarters and European quarters. A school's of schools of natives and schools of Europeans. In the same way, we need not to recall apartheid in South Africa. Yet if we examine closely this system of compartments, we will at least be able to reveal the lines of force it implies. This approach to the colonial world, its ordering and its geographical layout will allow us to mark out the lines of which the decolonized society will be organized. The colonial world is a world cut in two. The dividing line, the frontiers are shown by barracks and police stations. In the colonies, it is the policemen and the soldiers who are officials instituted go-betweens, the spokesmen of the settler and his rule of oppression. In capitalist societies, the educational system, whether lay or clerical, the structure of moral reflexes handed down from father to son, the exemplary honesty of workers who are given a medal after 50 years of good and loyal service, and the affection on which springs from harmonious relations and good behavior. All these aesthetics and expressions of respect for the established order serves to create around the exploited person an atmosphere of submission and an inhibition which lightens the task of policing considerably. In a capitalist country, the multitude of moral teachers, counselors, and bewilderers separate the exploited from those in power. In the colonial countries, on the contrary, the policemen and the soldiers, by their immediate presence and their frequent and direct actions, maintain contact with the natives and advise him by means of rifle butts and napalm to not to budge. It is obvious here that the agents of government speaks the language of pure force. The intermediary does not lighten the oppression nor seek to hide the domination. He shows them up and puts them into practice with a clear conscience of an upholder of the peace, yet he is the bringer of violence into the home and into the minds of the native. Back up. Colonialism is a form of imperialism, and imperialism is an international expression of capitalism. You don't fully understand colonialism, and you don't successfully attack it without understanding and attacking capitalism. Colonialism is a comprehensive system operating on all social levels, economic, political, and cultural, and is not a mere expression of military aggressions, i.e. violence, in physical form. In most cases, colonial violence in armed/physical forms is preceded by unarmed and non-physical forms of aggression in the guise of traders, academics, missionaries, who seek not only to lay hold of the land and labor of the peoples, but also to lay hold of their minds, their customs, their language, and their languages. These violent actions suppress, distort, injure, frustrate, infringe, profane, and unduly alter the targeted peoples and their social order, and cripple the people's ability to resist and to regain their independence. Let us take a look at Weinreich's description of colonialism. Now, this person that we're going to read is a distorter. I think this person we're about to read is the distorter. Not sure. We'll find out. We'll read what they have to say. I think this one's a distorter. Colonialism means the forceful occupation of another people's land in order to extract material benefits. Thus, it means compelling the colonized to work for the colonizer. Economic interests. If there aren't enough suitable native workers, more can be imported. This is where slavery comes in handy. Fanon believes that colonialism depends on racism. Enslaving or oppressing another group of people is easier if they look different than you do. Colonialism also means imposing the cultural values of the colonizing nation upon the colonized. This is called the civilizing mission, or the white man's burden. Such phrases mask and justify the massive theft that drives the colonial project. Modern European colonialism began with Columbus' voyages of discovery involving claiming new land for European power. The growth of consumer capitalism mandated the growth of colonialism, and vice versa. Exploitation colonies had the sole purpose of producing wealth and extracting marketable commodities. Caribbean plantations colonies are prime examples. Settler colonies had the additional purpose of moving large groups of people from the colonized nation to the colony. The United States was a settler colony, as was Australia. Another one I have to appeal. They hate me today. Gosh, that's got to be 8. I don't know. All right, let's see here. That might have been a distortion. Let's find out. Colonialism is a single process, manifest in several forms, and each of these forms injures, oppressed peoples, i.e. colonialism is as a whole a form of the exploitation of natural resources and the prevention of independent development of industries, the drawing of arbitrary national borders, and the implantations of alien political systems, the imposition of a Eurocentric educational system, and the distortion of the history of the colonized people, the daily psychological trauma, the injuries inflicted upon the native during a single day spent amidst the colonial regime, or the use of armed to enforce all of the above. All right, we're going to go over here and we're going to read this little thing, this little excerpt. Because it is the systematic negation of the other of the other person, and a furious determination to deny the other person all attributes of humanity. Colonialism forces the people it dominates to ask themselves the question constantly, in reality, who am I? The defensive attitude created by the violent bringing together the colonized man and the colonial system forms themselves into a structure which then reveals the colonized personality. This sensitivity is easily understood if we simply study and are alive to the number of depth of the injuries inflicted upon the native during a single day spent amidst the colonial regime. It must in any case be remembered that the colonized people is not only simply a dominated people. Under the German occupation, the French remained men. Under the French occupation, the Germans remained men. In Algeria, there is not simply the domination, but the decision to the latter not to occupy anything more than the sum total of the land. The Algerians, the veiled women, the palm trees, and the camel makes up the landscape, the natural background to the human presence of the French. So right there, they're saying, like, the French make the Algerian people not like people. They dominate them. So yeah, they're like subhumans. Yeah. Therefore, colonial violence must be negated by revolutionary violence. That violence exercised by oppressed peoples, which contests for power by opposing the ideas which uphold the existing social reality and creates new ideas and new social realities. Revolutionary violence contests colonial rule on the streets, in the schools, in the homes, and in the hospitals. It repairs what colonial violence has impaired. It renews the momentum and initiatives of that colonial violence has caused to stagnate. It liberates liberties. Yeah, liberates. Okay, it liberates. The colonial violence has arrested, i.e. colonialism is not satisfied with merely holding a people in its grips and emptying their brains for all forms of content. It turns to the past of the oppressed peoples and distorts, disfigures, and destroys it. This work of devaluing pre-colonial history takes a dialectical significance today. The dialectical significance is that even today, we have to deal with the past as part of the process of shaping the future. It's also that here, for us, inside the belly of the beast, where the material dominates, we must begin to place the focus on the non-material idea over things, help people to become aware of the working of economic relationships by first helping them to develop their analytical skills and their ideo-theoretical capacity, their intellectual capacity. You must understand that this is a necessity in any coherent program. Colonialism creates a colonized personality, and total liberation is that which concerns all sectors of the personality. Fanon says again, and here's Fanon saying stuff. It is not only necessary to fight for the liberty of our people, you must also teach that people once again, and first learn once again yourself, what is the full stature of a person. And this you must do for as long as the fight lasts. You must go back into history, that history of people damned by other people, and you must bring about and render possible the meeting of our people and other people. In reality, the soldier who is engaged in armed combat in a national war deliberately measures from day to day the sum of all the degradations inflicted upon people by colonial oppression. The person of action has sometimes the exhausting impression that they must restore the whole of their people, that they must bring everyone to them out of the pit and out of the shadows. They very often see that their task is not only only to hunt down the enemy forces, but also to overcome the kernel of despair, which has hardened in the native's being. The period of oppression is painful, but the conflict, by reinstating the downtrodden, set a process of reintegration, which is fertile and decisive in the extreme. A people's victorious fight not only concentrates and the triumph of the rights, it also gives to that people consistent coherence and homogeneity. For colonialism has not simply depersonalized the individual, it has colonized. This depersonalization is equally felt in the collective sphere on the level of social structures. The colonized people find that they are reduced to a body of individuals who only find cohesion when in the presence of the colonizing nation. The fight carried on by the people for its liberation leads it, according to circumstances, either to refuse or else to explode the so-called truths which have been established in its consciousness by the colonial civil administration, by the military occupation, and by the economic exploitation. Armed conflict alone can drive out these falsehoods, create in people which force into inferiority in the most lively minds among us, in which literally mutilate us. Now let us meditate on some of this. It is not only necessary to fight so that you can raise your own flag and declare the existence of your own nation. You must also teach the people once again, and first learn again yourself, what is the full stature and meaning of being human, of being sovereign, and having the capacity to pursue your own aims, to define yourself, the content, and your humanity, and not have it defined by others, especially when those others are oppressing you, arresting your development, and restricting you to an environment that alienates you from yourself, from what you would or could be if not for their violence. Why is it that we can only find cohesion when in the presence of the colonizing nation? In one sense, it's because, oh my gosh, another fucking violation. Jesus Christ. This is bullshit. Hey, Gray. Where was I at?
In
Humanity.
Sense, it's because.
What's up?
In
What?
one sense, it's because. That's where you were. In one sense, it's because.
Which paragraph?
I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth sentence up from the bottom of the page.
I'm just gonna read it. Sorry. Now let us meditate on this. Let's meditate on some of this. It's not only necessary to fight so you can raise your own flags and declare the existence of your own nation. You must also teach the people once again, and first learn again yourself, what is the full stature, meaning of being human, of being sovereign, and having the capacity to pursue your own aims, to define for yourself the content of your humanity, and not have it defined by others, especially when those others are oppressing you, arresting your development, and restricting you to an environment that alienates you from yourself, from what you would or could be if not for their violence. Why is it that we can only find cohesion when in the presence of the colonizing nation? In one sense, it's because that presence imposes itself upon us in a way that prevents us from concentrating our energies upon our own human needs. That presence is very thing about the thought and practice of the colonizing nation and its influence upon us, and our hitherto inability to delink from it and create our own presence in the world. To a great degree, we know who we are, and we're afraid to even try to fully manifest ourselves. This brings to mind a line from Cornel West, which I wonder if he fully understands or has the courage to following through on it. Quote, "Black people will not succeed in America society if they are fully and freely themselves." My emphasis. We know that we aren't really natives or black people. They use the N-word. That we aren't black people or African Americans, but we are afraid to cut the cord. It's safer and easier to continue to be black people because we can do that without undergoing a discomfort and insecurities that comes with the effort of delink. To put it another way, focus on the last two sentences in the second quote paragraph. We've not only been depersonalized as individuals, but as people in a collective sphere on the level of social structures. What does it mean for a people to be depersonalized? On the level of social structures, that's it. It is very simply, really. It's very simple, really. It's about losing independence as a people. It's about not having authentic classes because the development of the nation people has been distorted and frustrated by colonialism. Thus, all the social and political science of the colonizing nation says that either the colonized people don't have their own classes, or that they are, in some strange way, unequal members of the classes of the colonizing nation. Quote, a body of individuals who only find coherence when in the presence of the colonizing nation. Reflect on that for a while. Now they're talking about black people and indigenous people, not white people. So let everybody know this. This is about white people. Okay. Now, the third quoted paragraph takes us again to the issues of the forms of colonialism and the expressions of its violence in each of these forms, i.e. its civil administration, its economic exploitation, as well as its military occupation. As colonialism causes the death and mutilation of the colonized people, the apparatus of the settler has meant the death of the Aboriginal
of the settler.
The appearance of the settler has meant the death of the Aboriginal society, culture, lethargy, and the petrification of individuals. It also creates the native, or they use the N-word, black person, which Fanon describes as an arrested image of a type of relationship. Yes, N-wordhood is the same as being a native. A N-word, which they use black or African American, is not really about the color of the skin, but about a type of relationship that we are otherwise refer to as colonialism or imperialism, or as capitalist exploitation. The relationship between the master and the slave, the settler and the native, the white and the black, and the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the oppressor nation and the oppressed nation, the exploitative ruling class and the revolutionary class, my emphasis. Colonial violence is that which, quote, has ruled over the order of the colonial world, which has ceaselessly drummed the rhythm for the destruction of native social forms and broken up without reserve the system of reference of the economy, the custom of dress and external life. It attacks as a whole the colonized people's material and intellectual life. We began to see a direct connection between the forms and effects of the process of colonial violence and the demand for an all-inclusive program of national and social revolution where Fanon talks of muscular tension and begins to list the forms of avoidance along which the path of revolutionary violence must travel while negating colonial violence. However, none of this is inevitable. Quote, the immobility to which the native is condemned can only be called in question if the native decides to put an end to the history of colonization, the history of pillage, and to bring into existence the history of the nation and history of decolonization. Any questions before we move on to the next part? Yes, Win Fanon. Any questions? No. Okay. Any questions, Joe?
No, I'm good. I understand.
All right. Okay.
I mean, I don't understand because, I'm not a person of color, but I understand.
Okay. Let's look ahead real quick. I think we're doing all right. All right. What were those questions again? What is decolonization? Let us say that from the NAC perspective, revolutionary violence and decolonizations are the same, that the terms describe the same process. For example, Warwick's definition of decolonization is that it is a, quote, process of changing from a colonial territory to an independent nation, occurring in social and cultural ways, as well as in political and economic ones. So I'd say that this describes the process of revolutionary violence as well as the process of decolonization. Granted, simply pointing to, quote, social and cultural ways, and to political and economic and military ways leaves out the kind of details that most young activists and would-be cadres are quickly to ask for. Most folks want blueprints handed to them. The fact is, I don't have all the answers. I am in prison and removed from the settings where the answers are most likely to be found. Now I can talk in more details on each of the areas, but it would all be more or less abstract because only those out in the real world can locate link themselves to the concrete realities in their environments that will allow motion to be made. Oh my gosh, another fucking violation. Jesus Christ. They don't like me. My job is to help. My job is to help with the hows and the whys. You have to find the whats for yourself and then test the theory, test the lessons, find the appropriate ways to take reality as it is and transform it. My concern is that we more fully and firmly grasp the hows and the whys and begin to maintain some continuity from one generation to the next and not continue to repeat the pattern of having to start from scratch every 20 to 30 years. This kind of continuity will help us to create social environments in our homes and neighborhoods that will allow entire families to be conscious and active, and not just one member of the family. Allow entire communities to be conscious and active, and not just one family on one block surrounded by Americans. So we can restrict our concepts of decolonization to a narrow vision of merely seizing power or regaining independence while otherwise maintaining a rudimentary development of consciousness and leaving the running of the society in the hands of relatively small privileged groups. To end the static period brought on by colonial oppression is not only to regain certain physical and political independence, but to pursue a certain path of social development. Quote, when a nation stirs as a whole, the new people are not an posterior, right? Posteriori. Okay, product of that nation. Rather, they coexist with it and triumph with its independence is, but an indispensable condition for the existence of men and women who are truly liberated. In other words, who are truly masters of all the material means, which makes possible the radical transformation of society. Decolonization is a renaissance of the nation, a revival or rebirth. It is the restoration of nationhood, i.e. sovereignty, to the people. Think here in terms of dynamism and dialectical relationships. Think in terms of thinking either stagnating or passing away, or as a forward motion, newness rising. Some terms like renaissance and revival, rebirth, and restoration have to be understood not as static images, but as terms describing phenomenon in motion and development. What's being revived is the people's ability to control their environment and shape their lives, their futures. It's not the old nation that rises, but a new one. Decolonization is the establishment of new social relations between individuals, new names for the people, for the schools and streets, and sometimes even new names for the new nation. At bottom, decolonization is a process which results in a new revolutionary and socialist consciousness. On the surface, it's easy to say that decolonization is it, quote, set sets out to change the order of the world. And it only appears initially to be a program of disorder because it opposes the order of the colonial system. Decolonization, revolutionary violence requires an ordering, a discipline, a coherence. It's an historical process which can be understood, becoming intelligible, nor clear to the people unless and until we discern the movements which give it historical forms and content. There we go. Decolonization, which sets up to change. Let me read it. Decolonization, which sets out to change the order of the world, is obviously a program of complete disorder, but it cannot come as a result of magical practices, nor of a natural shock, nor of a friendly understanding. Decolonization, as we know, is a historical process. That is to say that it cannot be understood. It cannot become intelligible nor clear to itself except in the exact measures that we can discern the movement which give it historical forms and content. Decolonization is the meeting of two forces opposed to each other by their very nature, which in fact owe their originality to the sort of substantification which results from and is nourished by the situation in the colonies. Their first encounter was marked by violence, and their existence together that is to say, the exploitation of the native by the settler was carried on by the dint of a great array of bayonets and cannon. The settler and the native are old acquaintances. In fact, the settler is right when he speaks of knowing them well, for it is the settler who has brought the native into existence and who perpetuates his existence. The settler owes the fact of his very existence, that is to say, his property, to the colonial system. All right. Unfortunately, our clarity comes only after many setbacks, in much suffering and loss of life. The understanding of a need for ordering has certain prerequisites, i.e., all this takes stock of the situation, this enlightening of consciousness, and this advance in the knowledge of the history of society are only possible within the framework of the organization and inside the structures of a people. Such an organization is set afoot by the use of revolutionary elements coming from the towns at the beginning of the rising, together with those rebels who go down into the country as the fight goes on. It is this core which constitutes the embryonic political organization of the rebellion. But on the other hand, the peasants, who are all the time adding to their knowledge in the light of experience, will come to show themselves capable of directing the people's struggles. Check. If there are to be guns, then there must first be minds behind the guns. Even embryonic consciousness, self-awareness, is a prerequisite for the people's decision to call into question the colonial world. Hold on a second. Oh, I keep thinking that I'm like running short on time. We're doing okay though. Okay. A program is a plan, and a plan means we must reflect upon our situation and develop the vision of how we want to live. It's not enough to say that. We simply don't want to continue to live as we do. Changing the way we live demands a vision of a new way, and we presently lack that vision. I say that we lack the vision because not enough of us understand the need for it. Not enough of us put in the time to reflect upon the present realities in a critical way. We lack vision because not enough because not enough of us work on making the analysis of the concrete situation, and too many of us lack the ability to take our reality as it is and begin to transform it. We haven't yet learned to apply theory in and through the test of practice, and our shortcoming leads us to downplay the need for theory only because we don't know how to develop it, test it, evaluate it, and adjust it. Decolonization is, but not quite simply, a replacement to put something new in place of a certain species of people by a new species of people. Now here, only in one context, is there meant a restoration of the native inhabitants to their former positions as an evolving independent people by and through the process of removing the colonizer. In a broader context, there are actually two species being replaced because the colonizer can't remain the same if colonialism truly comes to an end. There is no colonizer without the colonized. Both species are affected by the decolonization process. Both species are replaced, transformed into something new. Decolonization must have a period of transition, a period of development. From our studies, from the observation of our practice, we know that leaps don't happen all at once and in an instant. All the more need for the people to have knowledge of laws and social development and understanding of the process of social revolutionary change. All the more need for the people to have an awareness and a phenomenon of spontaneity and its weaknesses, and an awareness of the pitfalls of a narrow nationalist consciousness. All the more need for the people to be helped to realize that everything depends on them, and their salvation lies in their own cohesion, in the true understanding of their interests, and in knowing who are their enemies, and that if they stagnate, it's their responsibility. If they go forward, it's due to them to, quote, there is no such thing as a demiurge. How do you say it? Demiurge?
Demiurge.
A demiurge. There is no famous man who will take responsibility for everything. The demiurge is the people themselves, and the magic hands are finally only the hands of the people. Yes, it's transforming everybody. Yep. Decolonization. Oh, wait, I gotta read. Hold on. We're reading down here. And then I think this is from the book, from Wretched. In fact, we often believe with criminal superficiality that to educate the masses politically is to deliver a long political harangue from time to time. We think that it is enough that the leaders or one of the lieutenants should speak in the pompous tone about the principal events of the day for them to have fulfilled this bounden duty to educate the masses politically. Now political education means opening their minds, awakening them, and allowing the birth of their intelligence. As Césaire said, it is, quote, to invent souls. To educate the masses politically cannot mean making a political speech. What it means is to try relentlessly, and passionately to teach the masses that everything depends on them. In order to put all this into practice, in order to really incarnate the people, we repeat that there must be decolonization in the extreme. The movement from the top to the top to the bottom, and from the bottom to the top, should be a fixed principle, not through concerns for formalism, but because simply to respect this principle is to guarantee this of salvation. It is from this basis that forces amount up, which supply the summit with the dynamic with its dynamic, and makes it possible to dialectically for it to leap ahead. Okay. Decolonization is class struggle among the people, a struggle not simply between groups, but between class stands between forms and levels of consciousness. Class struggles is struggle between visions of how the world works and of how we should live. It's struggle between interests. So Fanon tells us that the people need to, quote, have it out with each other, so they can avoid the creations of neocolonialism and not have to realize 2 or 3 years after independence that they have been frustrated, that it wasn't worthwhile fighting, and that nothing has changed but the form. Why is this so? Because the people don't adequately change, advance in their knowledge, their politics. Let me make sure I said that right. Yeah, because the people don't adequately, another restriction. Jesus Christ. I don't get it. Like, stop doing it. Advance in their knowledge, their politics, their political, economic, and social awareness, etc. My emphasis. Check it again. Decolonization influences individuals modifies them fundamentally. It transforms spectators into privileged actors and is introduced by new people, and with it a new language, a new humanity. Decolonization is the variability, oh my gosh, I can't say the damn word.
Veritable
Veritable creation of new people. The thing which has been colonized becomes human during the same process by which it frees itself. Back through there. Now we're going back up here. Decolonization never takes place unnoticed, for it influences individuals and modifies them fundamentally. It transforms spectators, crushes with their essential. I can't say that word.
Essentiality.
Into privileged actors with the grandiose glare of history floodlights upon them. It brings the natural rhythm into existence, introduced by new men and with a new language, a new humanity. Decolonization is the variability. Oh my gosh, variability. I can't say the dang word. Variability. Veritable creation of new men. But this creation owes nothing of its legitimacy to any supernatural power. The thing which has been colonized becomes man during the same process it frees itself. This is the heart of the book, the key to it all. Decolonization, the revolutionary process, is about influencing and modifying people. The revolutionary process aims to transform spectators into actors. The revolutionary process is introduced by new people, i.e., not until the people have made fundamental change within themselves. They begin the revolutionary process. The process includes new language, which means the people have already begun to shape new meanings, new consciousness, and language is its medium. The revolutionary process exhibits a new humanity. It seems that Fanon's thought is a bit contagious. I'm beginning to share his obsession with the need for consciousness developed by the people so that they can use their magic hands to fully control their lives. Of course, I mean the masses, or the lower classes, or even the proletarian masses, and not the intellectual elements as we generally think of them. How did we used to say it? All power to the people. The aim is to turn all the people into leaders, into intellectuals. So decolonization requires the use of all means of revolutionary violence must be exercised in all forms: cultural, social, political, economic, and military. In order to pick up the gun, the colonized person must first begin to challenge colonial violence by developing and employing an opposing consciousness. The people must gradually begin to question the legitimacy of the colonial and capitalist world, and to believe in themselves, to assume responsibility for the institutions which, because they are there and stand as poles of oppositions to the oppressive state and pillars of to uphold the new people state. In other words, armed struggle is started when people begin to redefine themselves, lose their fear and awe of the oppressive state, and see it as illegitimate. To build their own social, cultural, political, and economic institutions to delink from the colonial capitalist world and their own anarchic myths and traditions. Revolutionary violence decolonization is, as a whole, a form of self-defense, i.e., that slogan and concept most widely used these days as part of a minimum program of agitation and propaganda, but a defense of the whole self, not just the physical body. The people's defense, self-defense, is an aggressive assertion of a new identity, a new self-awareness, and the acquisition and use of arms against the colonial system follows the spark of a new sense of self, a new sense of responsibility on the plane of morals. The people's self-defense follows certain awakening during the colonial period, where they'd otherwise fight among themselves and, quote, use each other as a screen, and each hides from his neighbor, the national enemy. Okay, now I have to go read something. Hold on a second. Oh my gosh, this is going to be long. Hold on a second. I'm going to do something. I'm going to mark it real quick so I don't have to sit there. Okay. It's right here. Okay. In the colonial context, as we have already pointed out, the natives fight among themselves. They tend to use each other as a screen, and each hides from his neighbor, the national enemy. When tired out after a hard 16-hour day, the native seeks down to rest on his mat, and a child on the other side of the canvas partition starts crying and prevents him from sleeping. It so happens that it is a little Algerian. When he goes to beg for a little Semolina,
Yes.
semolina, or a drop of oil from the grocers, to whom he already owes some hundreds of francs. And when he sees that he is refused, an immense feeling of hatred and an overpowering desire to unalive arises within him. And the grocer is an Algerian. The Algerian exposes to temptations to commit murder every day, famine, evictions from his room because he has not paid the rent. The mother's dried up breasts, milk children with skeletons. The building yards, which has this is such small words, so I'm trying, which has closed down. The employment that hangs out about the foreman. Yes, unemployed that hung around the foreman like crows. The native comes to see his neighbor as a relentless enemy. If he strikes his bare foot against the big stone in the middle of the path, it is a native who has placed it there, and a few olives that he was going to pick. Children have gone and eaten in the night. For during the colonial period in Algeria and elsewhere, many things may be done for a couple of pounds of simoleons.
No,
Semolinas. Several people may be killed over it. You need to use your imagination to understand that. I wish these words weren't so small. In Algeria, since the beginning of the War of National Liberation, everything has changed. The whole footstock of a family, or a what is that word? Or a Meccan, a mountain village in Algeria, may in a single evening be given to a passing company. The family's only donkey may be lent to transport a wooden fighter, and when a few days later the owner learns of the death of his animal, which has been machine gunned by the aeroplanes, he will not begin threatening, or oh my gosh, another fucking violation. Stop! I'm just reading. God damn, I'm just fucking reading. He will not begin threatening and swearing. He will not question the death of his donkey, but he will ask anxiously if the wounded man is safe and sound. Under colonial regime, anything may be done for a loaf of bread or a miserable sheep. The relations of man with matter, with the world outside and with history, are in the colonial period simply relations with food. For a colonized man in a contest of oppression like that in Algeria, living does not mean embodying moral values or taking his place in the coherent and fruitful development of the world. To live means to keep on existing. Every day is a victory, not a result of work, but a victory felt as a triumph for life. Thus, to steal dates or to allow one's sheep to eat the neighbor's grass is not a question of the negation of the property of others, nor the transgression of the law, nor lack of respect. These are attempts at murder. In order to understand that the robbery is not an illegal or an unfriendly action, but an attempt at murder, one must have seen the Caliban, men and women, for weeks at a time, going to get earth at the bottom of the valley and bringing it up in little baskets. Who is going to take the punishment? The French are down in the plain with the police, the army, and the tanks. On the mountain there are only Algerians. Up above there is heaven, with the promise of a world beyond the grave. Down below there are the French, with their very concrete promises of prison, beatings up, and execution. You are forced to come up again yourself. We discover the kernel of the hatred of self, which is characteristics of racial conflicts in segregated societies. Jesus, that was so small. The letters were so small. It was hard. It is only after they realize their humanity that they begin to sharpen the weapons, all weapons, for use against colonialism, and to forge a new society. We know that our people are armed today as never before, and in many respects armed by the oppressive state. But their having arms doesn't signal a turn towards the left. Even when we consider efforts by the enemy to disarm the people, it's not the guns that in their hands as such that's the source of the settlers' fear, but the potential threat posed by the armed and politically conscious people. All right, I think we're going to stop here where it says violence redirected. Okay. All right, let's see what Gray said. Worked in Iran. Okay. Okay. We revived into the mountains and yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. So we stopped on page 214 in the book, and it looks like 218 in the PDF. Okay. Anybody's welcome to come up and have the conversation and talk about what we just read. So it's open for anybody that wants to come up and talk. Does anybody have anything about what we just read?
It was all
Sure.
Oh, sorry, Finn. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. It was taking me a while to click on the microphone icon just because my phone just overheats when I'm on live.
I was just gonna say it was very educational along the lines of you have to have theory to go with decolonization, and you have to have decolonization to have revolution. That's all I was gonna say.
Actually, Joe, to add up to it, so when I was listening to communists read like the very first 10 minutes, the author was talking about how a lot of the so-called Western radicals fetishize a lot of radical concepts and all that. But then, as we were reading, I think there was a part where this fetishization of a certain radical concept or concepts, they're often used to hide liberal intentions. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know if you guys have noticed this or not, and I'll just give an example that actually happened today. I'm not kidding. So I was on YouTube today as I was, taking a rest from doing my chores, and this YouTube channel had a post, and they said that we need to have a regime change in the United States. Now, let's take a second to let's just take a second to think about what that could mean, okay? You want a regime change in the United States, meaning that they're most likely inciting an armed struggle, okay? We can all agree that an armed struggle, as the author was saying, I think in the second half of what you were reading, that an armed struggle is inherently decolonial and is necessary for decolonization, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so, but here's where the problem is. This person said, we need a regime change in the United States. But the thing is that how do we know that this person is not using an armed struggle because they're saying a regime change? Why not just abolish the United States, period? Because here's the thing, what that smells like to me, it smells like a new movement of Democrats who are trying to appeal to us by saying, you know what, yes, let's do an armed struggle. And what they're planning to do is that they want to overthrow Donald Trump, but they're not really they're obviously not looking to abolish the United States, meaning that they're nowhere near interested in a land back policy. And so on top of that, if they unalive all of these so-called right-wingers that we have nowadays, what's stopping them, or better should I say, what's stopping someone like Zoran Mamdani from becoming like someone like Donald Trump? Exactly. Does that make sense or not?
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Understand the character and what it drives to, because even spontaneity needs to come into a more well-organized, more militant, and then that even needs to develop a theory. And he kept saying that theory needs to be put to practical use. So we have to put it to practical use. You know what I mean? And we have to and then we have to make the adjustments according to that.
Which is why I said I think it's really important to watch out for the intentions, because if you're someone who is looking forward for an armed struggle, which I also am, but the thing is, if your intentions are just to take power, and because you think that you can be a better leader than the ones we have right now, then you're nowhere near decolonial. And I think you should be. I'm not saying you communist, but I just think that you should be highly scrutinized and questioned.
Yep. Because even at the decolonial measures, Fanon talks about that it has to have a socialist, and he in particular says a scientific socialist character. That's the outcome. What's the outcome of this movement? You're thinking for regime change, but what's the outcome? What do you want politically, socially, and economically? Do you want the same thing? Are you reforming and consolidating and trying to revive liberalism again? You know what I mean? So yeah, are you trying to replicate liberalism? Are you trying to replicate a revolutionary process that seeks the ending of the occupation of the United States? What's the character and content that you do? What are your deeds and actions that perpetuate towards that? What is your practice and theory? What is your line? You know what I mean? Those are things to ask and question. Go ahead, Dooley.
Yeah. So, like, also, I have noticed that people that claim to be, like, radical and for liberation, all of a sudden, when they have, like, a spot where they didn't see before, I'm gonna be honest, most of the time they just make sure that they justify it. Like, people think that there's such a thing as a non-liberal under liberal society. No, you cannot be a non-liberal. You can only be anti-liberal, meaning you are constantly going against liberalism. And if you are in the mindset that you are a non-liberal, you are going to be more susceptible to liberalism. And it's going to make it to where there isn't liberation, because it will put into your mind that all that needs to change is who's on top, not that the structure itself is the problem.
Yep. As Marxists, we look at the systems and how it engages with society and what contradiction it brings about. Even in a communist society, we should still look at those contradictions and what's bringing them about and how to change those qualitatively, for sure. But now, yes, we have to understand the character, and that's why we have to continuously to gain knowledge, because material conditions do not stay stagnant; they're ever increasing and changing its character and development constantly. That's why we have to ever observe these things in the material conditions and readjust our scientific knowledge and our scientific understanding of how the world is engaging with different parts of the world. You know? Anybody else have any more to say? Go ahead. Did you have anything to say, Dooley? You unmuted.
Oh, no, I was just saying, as in agreeing with you.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have anything to say before we close it out?
I was just going to say that the question that you ended with when I was, making my first comment, is literally the exact, I kid you not, that's like the exact question that I left on the comment section of that post. I asked, when you mean a regime change in the United States, do you mean an armed struggle in order to completely abolish the existence of the United States and apply a land back policy, which would give back the stewardship of the land back to the indigenous people? Or are you looking to overthrow Donald Trump with an armed struggle? Overthrow DJT with an armed struggle, but still preserve the colonial regime that is the United States and just capitulate? So the guy left a like on my comment. He did not fucking respond. I don't trust that person.
No. That's why they also talk about. We have to continuously ask questions: who, what, when, how, and wow, and what is the agenda? Because another thing you also have to bring up too, Dudley, is that we're constantly being propagandized. So we have to constantly struggle against propaganda work and neoliberal society. We have to constantly make sure our mind is free from the chains of exploitation of the capitalist system and colonialism. We have to continuously do those things and continuously be ever observant.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, under a liberal society, we will always have liberal tendencies. And if you do not acknowledge that and you think you are a non-liberal, you are the most liberal.
All right. The YouTuber's name, oh my gosh, Murphy. All right. Well, if no one else has anything to say, I do appreciate you all coming up and engaging in conversations about what we read, because it really helps me a lot. Because when someone comes up, when I'm done reading, and someone says, "What did you read? What do you summarize?" And I'm like, I don't know. But having conversations like this with people coming in, it really draws it out. So I appreciate everybody drawing it out. And I got another violation. It's no big deal, Gray. Tomorrow, I'll be doing the same thing tomorrow at 6:30 Central Time. Same book. All right? And then I'm probably gonna read Dying Colonialism. I've been wanting to read that online. All right, everybody. All right, well,